golden autumn leaves crunched beneath expensive Italian leather shoes as Victor Langston knelt frozen on the code playground wood chips. His corporate poker face, the one that had intimidated Fortune 500 CEOs, crumbled completely as three simple words escaped his 6-year-old son's lips for the first time ever. "I want to play." But it wasn't Victor who had unlocked this miracle. The $3,000 Armani suit now bore grass stains and tears, but Victor couldn't care less. His hands trembled as he reached toward Ashen, afraid that any sudden movement might shatter this impossible moment. For 6 years, 6 long, silent years, he had waited to hear his son's voice. Not in a sterile therapy office, not during a scripted exercise with expensive specialists, but here, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, with the October wind carrying the laughter of other children who spoke as easily as breathing. Every parent dreams of hearing their child's voice the first time. That magical mama or dada that signals the beginning of countless conversations, bedtime stories, and whispered, "I love yous." But when that moment is stolen, when months turn to years of desperate silence, the dream becomes an ache that follows you everywhere. To boardrooms where you command respect with your voice, yet return home to a child who has never used his. Victor's throat tightened as Ashen's small hand reached out, not toward him, but toward the woman who had somehow accomplished what decades of medical intervention could not. A stranger. A single mother in faded jeans and worn sneakers who had approached them just 20 minutes ago with nothing but a gentle smile and infinite patience. "Thank you," Victor whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of his own thundering heartbeat. The woman, Talia, she'd introduced herself, knelt beside Ashen with the same natural grace she'd shown from the moment she'd noticed the quiet boy sitting alone on the swing. "Sometimes," she said softly, her eyes meeting Victor's with an understanding that spoke of her own battles fought and won. "Children just need someone who sees their potential instead of their problems." The weight of those words hit Victor like a physical force. How many specialists had focused on what was wrong with Ashen? How many reports had cataloged his deficits, his delays, his inability to meet developmental milestones? Yet this woman had seen something else entirely. A child ready to connect, waiting for the right invitation. Ashen's voice came again, stronger this time. "Can Emma play too?" Victor's vision blurred. Emma, Talia's daughter, was the bridge his son had needed. Not another adult with clipboards and assessments, but a peer who communicated through giggles and shared games rather than clinical exercises. But what Victor discovered next would change everything he thought he knew about healing, about success, and about the true meaning of breakthrough moments. Around them, the code playground had transformed from a place of isolation into a stage of possibility. Other parents had noticed the quiet miracle unfolding near the swings. A few smiled knowingly. Perhaps they, too, had weathered storms with their own children. Others watched with curiosity as the well-dressed businessman sat cross-legged in the mulch, his son's small voice painting a new reality with every tentative word. "Daddy," Ashen said, turning those bright eyes toward Victor for the first time during a public interaction. "Daddy, I like it here." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of every sleepless night Victor had spent wondering if he was failing his son. Every therapy session that ended in frustration. Every school meeting where educators spoke in hushed tones about alternative communication, methods, and realistic expectations. Victor pulled his son close, breathing in the scent of autumn air and possibility. Over Ashen's shoulder, he caught Talia's eye, this remarkable woman who had given them both a gift beyond measure. She smiled, and he saw in her expression the quiet pride of someone who understood that the smallest victories often cast the longest shadows. Have you ever witnessed a moment that rewrote someone's entire future? Hit that like button if you're ready for this incredible journey of how a single mother's wisdom transformed not just a mute child, but an entire family's destiny. Because what happened next in Serenity Park would prove that sometimes the most profound healing comes not from those who study silence, but from those who simply choose to listen. To understand the magnitude of that moment in Serenity Park, you need to know who Victor Langston was before his world changed forever. At 34, Victor commanded the 42nd floor of Manhattan's most prestigious business tower. His corner office overlooked Central Park, a view that cost his company $12 million annually, but yielded returns that made even seasoned investors take notice. When Victor walked into a boardroom, conversations stopped. When he spoke, billion-dollar deals shifted direction. Competitors studied his strategies in business schools. Forbes had featured him on 3 covers. His morning routine was legendary among his staff. Coffee at 5:47 a.m., black, no sugar. Market analysis by 6:15. First conference call with London by 6:30, when their trading day was already in full swing. By the time most people were hitting snooze buttons, Victor had already moved millions across international markets. Langston doesn't negotiate? His assistant once told a nervous client. He states terms, and others find ways to accept them. But every evening at exactly 6:47 p.m., this corporate titan would shut down his laptop, ignore the buzzing phone, and drive 43 minutes to a modest suburban home where his greatest challenge waited, not with a contract to sign or a deal to close, but with silence so profound it had become the loudest thing in Victor's life. Ashen Langston was 6 years old and had never called his father Daddy. Not once. The medical files stacked on Victor's home office desk told a story that no amount of money could rewrite. Selective mutism, the specialist said, anxiety-induced speech inhibition, developmental communication disorder. The labels multiplied, but the outcome remained unchanged. A brilliant little boy trapped behind walls of silence. Victor had spent $247,000 over 4 years. Speech pathologists from Johns Hopkins, child psychologists from Stanford, even alternative healers from Switzerland who promised breakthrough techniques. Each appointment began with hope and ended with the same gentle explanation. These things take time, Mr. Langston. Every child develops differently. Time. The one resource Victor couldn't acquire, manipulate, or control. He could negotiate billion-dollar mergers, but couldn't get his son to say Daddy. The irony wasn't lost on him. Men twice his age sought his counsel on complex international acquisitions, yet he sat helpless while his own child communicated through nods and head shakes. But Ashen wasn't broken. Victor knew this with absolute certainty. The boy created artwork that left teachers speechless. Detailed drawings of underwater cities, elaborate comic strips featuring superheroes who solved problems through kindness rather than violence. His standardized test scores consistently placed him in the 95th percentile. When Victor read bedtime stories, Ashen's eyes followed every word, his expressions shifting with each plot twist. They had developed their own language over the years. A raised eyebrow meant more please. 2 quick nods indicated excitement. A gentle hand on Victor's arm was Ashen's way of saying, "I understand, Dad, and it's okay." These silent conversations carried more weight than most business negotiations Victor conducted. During weekend mornings, they would sit together at the kitchen table, Victor with his financial reports, Ashen with his sketchpad. No words needed. The boy would occasionally slide his drawings across the table. A house with 2 figures standing in front, always holding hands. A superhero who looked remarkably like Victor, cape and all. Sometimes just the word love, written in careful 6-year-old handwriting. Victor kept every single drawing in a special folder, more precious to him than any contract he'd ever signed. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago during a parent-teacher conference at Hillcrest Elementary. "We think Ashen might benefit from our special needs program," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice thick with misguided compassion. Children with developmental delays often thrive when expectations are adjusted to their capabilities. Developmental delays? Victor's business voice emerged, the one that had made grown men reconsider their position. "My son scores in the top 5% on every assessment you've given him. Academically, yes," the teacher continued, undeterred. "But socially and emotionally, his inability to communicate suggests he might be more comfortable in a smaller, more structured environment." "He communicates perfectly," Victor said, his hands clenched beneath the table. "You're simply not listening." The drive home that evening was torture. Ashen sat in his booster seat, drawing in his notebook, completely unaware that his future was being debated by adults who saw his silence as a deficit rather than a choice. Victor caught his son's eye in the rearview mirror. those bright, intelligent eyes that held entire conversations, and felt something crack inside his chest. That night, Victor made 17 phone calls. Private schools, alternative programs, even homeschooling consultants. Each conversation ended the same way. Has he been evaluated for speech delays? What interventions have you tried? Interventions, as if Ashen was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be understood. The final straw came Monday morning when Ashen's teacher sent home a note. Ashen had another non-participatory day. Perhaps we should discuss medication options to help with his social anxiety. Medication. For a 6-year-old whose only crime was processing the world differently. That evening, Victor sat on Ashen's bedroom floor, watching his son arrange toy soldiers in careful formations, not for battle, but for what appeared to be a peaceful negotiation between two armies. The boy's strategic thinking was remarkable. His empathy, evident in every gentle placement of the figures, was profound. "What do you need, buddy?" Victor whispered. "Tell me how to help you." Ashen looked up, those wise eyes meeting his father's. The boy reached for his sketchpad and drew quickly. 2 stick figures sitting on what looked like code playground equipment. One small, one tall, both smiling. The message was clear. Comment below if you've ever felt like you were fighting the whole world for someone you love. Because Victor was about to learn that sometimes the battle isn't against the silence. It's against everyone who refuses to hear the voice that's already there. The next morning, instead of his usual route to the office, Victor Langston made a different choice. He loaded a small backpack with Ashen's favorite snacks, grabbed the boy's jacket, and drove toward Serenity Park, a place where maybe, just maybe, the world might finally listen to what his son had been saying all along. Serenity Park existed in the gentle space between suburban dreams and childhood wonder. Tucked behind a row of maple trees that blazed orange and gold in the October afternoon, the Code playground stretched across 2 acres of carefully maintained grass and wood-chip paths. It was the kind of place where time moved slower, where the urgent demands of the outside world softened into something more manageable. Victor's black Tesla Model S looked distinctly out of place among the lineup of minivans and SUVs decorated with soccer ball decals and honor student bumper stickers. The $120,000 luxury sedan drew curious glances from other parents, not unfriendly, but aware that someone from a different world had entered their sanctuary. He had chosen 2:30 p.m. deliberately. Research, the same methodical approach he applied to market analysis, had revealed this was the optimal time. Late enough that the lunch crowd had dispersed, early enough to avoid the after-school rush. Most children present would be preschoolers and kindergartners, less likely to overwhelm Asher with their energy. The autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke from distant chimneys and the earthiness of fallen leaves. Somewhere across the park, a maintenance crew was raking the walking paths, their methodical scraping providing a gentle rhythm to the afternoon. Children's voices rose and fell like music, some calling for their parents, others negotiating the complex social dynamics of shared swings and contested monkey bars. Victor envied how effortlessly these conversations flowed. A 4-year-old girl shouting, "Mommy, watch me slide," and receiving immediate, delighted attention. Twin boys debating whether the sandbox castle needed a moat, their mother offering suggestions while scrolling through her phone. A toddler babbling constant commentary to his father, who responded to each nonsensical observation as if it contained profound wisdom. "Ready, buddy?" Victor asked, opening Asher's car door. Asher nodded, clutching his small backpack, the one containing his sketchpad, colored pencils, and a book about marine animals. His eyes swept across the Code playground with the careful assessment Victor recognized from their home routines. Cataloging escape routes, identifying quiet spaces, calculating the safest path through the social landscape ahead. They walked together toward the central play structure, Victor's leather shoes sinking slightly into the soft wood chips. Asher stayed close, his small hand occasionally brushing against Victor's leg, a gesture that said both, "I trust you," and "Don't leave me." The Code playground itself was a masterpiece of inclusive design. Ramps alongside stairs, quiet corners balanced with open spaces, equipment that challenged without intimidating. Whoever had planned this space understood that children needed choices, not just challenges. Asher gravitates toward a swing set positioned slightly apart from the main action. The perfect observation post, close enough to watch other children play, far enough to avoid unwanted interaction. Victor settled onto a nearby bench, pulling out his phone more for appearance than necessity. Other parents might think he was checking emails rather than monitoring his son's every micro-expression. From this vantage point, he could see the entire social ecosystem at work. Near the slides, 3 children had formed an instant alliance based on their shared love of dinosaurs. Their voices carried clearly. "I'm a T-Rex. I'm a Triceratops with super strong horns. Can I be a flying dinosaur? I want to be a pterodactyl." Their parents sat in a loose circle, coffee cups in hand, occasionally looking up from their conversations to acknowledge particularly impressive roars or aerial maneuvers. It looked so natural, so easy. Victor's chest tightened with familiar longing. Asher pumped his legs gently, sending the swing in lazy arcs. His eyes followed every interaction around him, the negotiation over sandbox territory, the careful taking of turns at the monkey bars, the way an older child helped a younger one reach the high platform. Learning, always learning, but never participating. A group of children raced past, their game involving elaborate rules about lava pits and safe zones. One boy stopped directly in front of Asher's swing. "Want to play Lava Monster with us?" he asked with the casual friendliness that only children possess. Asher's swing slowed, his eyes met the boy's, and Victor held his breath. This was the moment, the invitation that came so rarely, always carrying the weight of possibility and the threat of disappointment. Asher's lips parted slightly. For a heartbeat, Victor believed his son might actually respond. Then Asher looked away, shaking his head almost imperceptibly. "Okay," the boy said, shrugging with the resilient acceptance of childhood. "Maybe later." He ran back to his friends, and the game continued. No cruelty, no exclusion. Just the natural flow of childhood moving around his son's silence like water around a stone. Victor's phone buzzed, a text from his assistant. "Board meeting moved to 4 p.m. Can you make it?" 4 o'clock. That gave them another hour here, maybe more if he was willing to reschedule. The old Victor would have packed up immediately, would have prioritized the meeting over this quiet afternoon. But sitting here, watching Asher swing gently in the filtered sunlight, Victor found himself typing, "Reschedule for tomorrow. Family commitment." The wind shifted, carrying the sound of children's laughter more clearly. Somewhere near the slides, a little girl was singing a song about butterflies, her voice pure and unself-conscious. Other children had joined in, creating an impromptu choir that made even the adults smile. Asher stopped swinging entirely, his attention caught by something beyond Victor's line of sight. But something happened next that no amount of corporate training had prepared Victor for. A woman was approaching their quiet corner of the code playground, walking with purpose but not urgency. Her attention fixed on Asher with a gentle smile that seemed to understand exactly what this moment required. She appeared like an answer to a prayer Victor didn't know he'd been whispering. Talia Martinez moved across the wood-chip landscape with the quiet confidence of someone who had navigated countless code playground social dynamics. Her faded jeans bore the honest wear of active motherhood. Grass stains at the knees, a small tear near the back pocket that had been carefully mended rather than replaced. Her sneakers had seen better days, their white canvas now a comfortable shade of adventure gray. But her smile held the kind of radiance that expensive cosmetics could never replicate. The glow of someone who had fought battles and emerged with her heart intact. She walked beside a girl who appeared to be around Asher's age, their conversation flowing in the easy rhythm of mother and daughter who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. The child, Emma, Victor would learn later, had dark curls that bounced as she skipped and eyes that sparkled with mischief and intelligence. "Remember what we talked about, sweetheart," Talia was saying as they approached the swing area. Sometimes the quietest kids have the most interesting thoughts. They're just waiting for the right person to listen. Victor's business instincts, honed by years of reading people across conference tables, immediately cataloged details. Single mother, no ring, and she carried herself with the particular brand of independence that came from handling everything alone. Working class, her clothes were clean and well-maintained, but clearly budget-conscious. Confident, she moved through the world without apology, despite the obvious financial gap between her life and the affluent suburbs surrounding them. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They held the kind of wisdom that only came from personal experience with struggle. This wasn't someone who had read about childhood challenges in parenting books. This was someone who had lived them. Emma ran ahead toward the monkey bars, calling back, "Mom, can I show the boy on the swing how to pump higher?" "Let's see if he wants company first," Talia replied, her voice carrying the gentle correction of a parent who understood boundaries. She approached Asher's swing with the deliberate slowness of someone who recognized anxiety when she saw it. No sudden movements, no overwhelming enthusiasm, just steady, respectful progress. "Hi there," she said, positioning herself where Asher could see her clearly without feeling trapped. "I'm Talia, and that's my daughter Emma. She's been hoping to find someone to explore this code playground with." Asher's swing slowed as he processed this unexpected interaction. His eyes darted to Victor, checking for permission, for guidance, for reassurance that this was safe. Victor managed a small nod, though his heart was hammering against his ribs. "This code playground looks perfect for adventures," Talia continued, lowering herself to Asher's eye level with fluid grace. She wasn't talking down to him or over him. She was speaking to him as an equal. "Want to explore together?" The question hung in the autumn air like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Victor had witnessed countless negotiations in his career. He knew the precise moment when a deal balanced on the edge of success or failure. The silence that stretched between offer and acceptance. The invisible calculations happening behind careful expressions. But this was different. This was his son, standing at the threshold of something Victor had dreamed about for 6 years. Asher's small hands gripped the swing chains tighter. His eyes moved from Talia to Emma, who was hanging upside down from the monkey bars, her hair cascading like a dark waterfall. Emma wasn't staring at him or waiting for a response. She was simply being herself, present, happy, available. "Emma's really good at finding the best hiding spots," Talia added conversationally. "And she knows which slide is the fastest." Her tone suggested that whether Asher joined them or not, he was already accepted, already valued. The breakthrough came so quietly that Victor almost missed it. Asher's lips parted. His throat worked as if testing the mechanics of speech. His eyes met Talia's directly, the first time Victor had ever seen his son make sustained eye contact with a stranger. "Play," Asher whispered. The word was barely audible, like a butterfly landing on flower petals, but it exploded through Victor's consciousness like thunder. His vision blurred instantly. His hands, usually steady as granite in the highest pressure situations, began to shake uncontrollably. 6 years. 6 years of silence, shattered by a single word. His knees gave out entirely, sending him stumbling forward off the bench. The expensive phone in his hand clattered to the ground, forgotten. His breath came in sharp, shallow gasps as the magnitude of the moment crashed over him like a tidal wave. "Play," Asher said again, stronger this time, his voice gaining substance with repetition. Talia's face bloomed into a smile that could have powered the entire code playground. "I would love to play with you," she said simply. "What sounds fun?" Victor pressed a hand to his mouth, trying to contain the sob that threatened to escape. Around them, other parents had begun to notice the commotion. A mother pushing her toddler in a nearby swing had stopped mid-push, her expression shifting from curiosity to understanding as she recognized something extraordinary happening. "Oh my goodness," she whispered to her companion. "I think that little boy just spoke for the first time." The news rippled outward through the small community of afternoon parents like warmth from a campfire. Not intrusive or gossipy, but genuinely celebratory. These were people who understood the significance of childhood milestones, who knew that every family carried their own struggles and victories. Emma had abandoned the monkey bars entirely, approaching Asher's swing with the careful excitement of someone who sensed she was part of something special. "Want to see the fort behind the big slide?" she asked. "It's got a secret entrance and everything." Asher looked to his father again. But this time, Victor saw something different in those beloved eyes. Not anxiety seeking permission, but excitement asking for encouragement. "Go ahead, buddy," Victor managed, his voice thick with emotion. "Have fun." As Asher climbed down from the swing, Victor caught Talia's eye. The gratitude he felt was too immense for language, too profound for simple words. She had given him the greatest gift imaginable, his son's voice, and she had done it with such natural grace that it seemed like the most obvious thing in the world. "Thank you," he whispered, the only words he could manage. Talia's smile softened with understanding. "Every child has their own timing," she said quietly. "Sometimes they just need to feel truly seen." Victor watched Asher follow Emma toward the climbing structure, his son's movements lighter somehow, as if speaking had released a weight he'd been carrying. The boy who had sat silent on the swing just minutes ago was now pointing at different pieces of equipment, engaging in whispered conversation with his new friend. Around them, the Code playground had transformed from a place of isolation into a celebration of possibility. Other children, drawn by the positive energy, began gravitating toward Emma and Asher's exploration. Parents exchanged knowing smiles, and Victor felt himself becoming part of a community he hadn't even known existed. That single word changed everything. Smash that subscribe button if you believe in the power of unexpected kindness, because what happened next would prove that sometimes the most profound healing comes from the most ordinary moments. As Victor sat back down on the bench, his legs still shaky with emotion, he realized that his entire understanding of success was being rewritten. All those boardroom victories suddenly seemed insignificant compared to hearing his son say "play" to a kind stranger in a suburban code playground. Talia settled beside him, both of them watching their children begin an adventure that would change all their lives forever. 20 minutes later, as Emma and Asher explored the wooden castle structure with 3 other children who had naturally joined their adventure, Victor found himself in the most important conversation of his adult life. "I don't understand how you did that," he said, his voice still carrying the tremor of a man whose world had just shifted on its axis. 6 years of specialists, therapy sessions, medical consultations, and you got him to speak in 20 minutes. Talia settled more comfortably on the bench beside him, her eyes never straying far from the children. "It wasn't magic," she said softly. "Emma was just like Asher 2 years ago." Victor turned to look at her fully. The little girl currently leading an elaborate treasure hunt bore no resemblance to the silent child he'd been watching struggle for years. Emma's voice carried clearly across the code playground as she assigned roles and explained rules, her confidence natural and unforced. "Emma didn't speak to strangers until she was 7, Talia continued. "Selective mutism, the doctors called it. For 3 years, I watched her withdraw more and more from the world. She'd whisper to me at home, but the moment we left our apartment, she became completely silent." "What changed?" Victor asked, genuinely desperate to understand. Talia smiled, the expression carrying both joy and the memory of old pain. "I stopped trying to fix her and started trying to understand her." She gestured toward the children, where Asher was now actively participating in what appeared to be a complex negotiation about dragon defenses and castle moats. "I have a master's degree in child development from UCLA. Spent 4 years studying communication disorders, attachment theory, behavioral interventions. I could quote research about selective mutism until your ears bled." Victor raised an eyebrow. The woman beside him in faded jeans and scuffed sneakers held advanced degrees. His assumptions realigned with uncomfortable speed. "But all that education meant nothing," Talia continued, "until I stopped seeing Emma as a problem to be solved and started seeing her as a person with something to say. The breakthrough came when I realized I was adding to her anxiety instead of reducing it." "How?" Victor asked, though part of him already suspected the answer would be uncomfortably familiar. "Every time we went somewhere, I was tense, worried about how she'd perform, whether she'd embarrass herself, what other people would think. Children absorb that energy like sponges. Your anxiety becomes their anxiety. My desperation for her to speak was actually making it harder for her to find her voice." The words hit Victor like a physical blow. How many times had he brought his own frustration to therapy sessions? How often had he projected his disappointment when Asher remained silent during family gatherings? Every business meeting where he'd checked his phone, hoping for a miracle text from a teacher reporting breakthrough? "I've been sabotaging him," Victor said quietly. "No." Talia's voice was firm but gentle. "You've been loving him the only way you knew how. But love without understanding can feel like pressure, even when that's the last thing we intend." Across the code playground, Asher's laugh rang out. The first time Victor had ever heard that sound in public. His son was hanging upside down from a low bar, his face red with giggles as Emma made funny faces at him from the ground. "Tell me what you did differently," Victor said. "I'll pay you. Whatever you charge for consultation, I'll double it." Talia shook her head. "This isn't about money. This is about community, about children supporting other children." She paused, watching Emma help Asher flip right side up. "But I'll tell you everything I learned if you want to know." "Please." First, environment matters more than technique. Therapy rooms feel like medical settings, even when they're decorated with bright colors and toys. Children know they're there to be fixed. But code playgrounds? Code playgrounds are for fun. There's no performance pressure here. Victor nodded, making mental notes the way he would during crucial business presentations. Second, peer interaction is more powerful than adult intervention. Emma spoke to Asher because he wasn't expecting her to. She was just another kid wanting to play. Adults carry too much weight. We represent authority, judgment, evaluation. Children represent possibility. And third, Victor prompted when she paused. Third is the hardest lesson. Different timelines don't mean broken dreams. Asher wasn't ready before today. Not because something was wrong with him, but because he was still building the confidence he needed. Forcing that timeline would have damaged his trust in his own voice. Victor felt something fundamental shifting in his understanding. "I negotiate million-dollar deals but couldn't unlock my son's voice," he said, "because I was treating it like a business transaction instead of..." "What?" "Instead of a relationship," Talia finished. "Communication isn't a skill to be acquired. It's a bridge to be built between people who trust each other." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching their children create elaborate stories with a group that had now grown to 6 kids. Asher was speaking in full sentences, his voice still quiet but steady. Victor had to resist the urge to record every word on his phone. "What happens now?" he asked. "How do we make sure this isn't just a one-time thing?" Talia considered the question seriously. "Small wins build confidence. We don't push him into situations he's not ready for, but we create opportunities for success. Regular visits here, same time, same relaxed atmosphere. Let him build relationships with Emma and the other regular kids." "A support network," Victor said, his business brain immediately grasping the concept. "Exactly. But organic, not forced. Children can sense when adults are orchestrating their interactions. This has to feel natural." Victor pulled out his phone, then stopped. "I was going to check my calendar, see what meetings I could move to make Tuesdays free." "Good instinct," Talia said. "Consistency matters more than frequency. Same day, same time, same patient approach. Asher needs to know this space is reliable." "What about school? His teacher wants to move him to special education classes. Has she seen him today?" Talia's voice carried an edge of protective steel that reminded Victor she was a mother first, despite her professional expertise. Asher doesn't need different expectations. He needs teachers who understand that intelligence and communication style aren't the same thing. Victor felt a surge of gratitude so intense it almost overwhelmed him. For 6 years he'd felt like he was fighting this battle alone. Now suddenly, he had an ally who not only understood the challenges, but had navigated them successfully. "Why are you helping us?" he asked. "You don't know me. Don't owe me anything." Talia's smile was soft but fierce. "Because 3 years ago, I was sitting exactly where you're sitting, watching my brilliant, sensitive daughter struggle to connect with the world. A stranger at this same code playground took 5 minutes to include Emma in a game, and it changed our entire trajectory." She gestured toward Emma, who was now teaching Asher and 2 other children a clapping game. "That woman didn't have degrees in child development. She was just a grandmother who understood that kindness creates safety, and safety creates courage. I'm passing that forward. Community over isolation, Victor said, understanding flooding through him. Community over isolation, Talia agreed. Every Tuesday at 2:30, if you're willing. Same bench, same patient approach, same trust that children know what they need better than we think they do. Victor looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw not a problem to be solved, but a person finding his way at his own pace. We'll be here, he said. As Victor made that promise, he had no idea that these Tuesday afternoons would become the foundation for something far greater than his son's voice. They would become the blueprint for an entirely new way of living. The following weeks became a masterclass in patience, progress, and the delicate art of celebrating small miracles without overwhelming them. Week 2 arrived with Victor's newfound commitment to Tuesday afternoons. He had rescheduled 3 client calls and delegated a quarterly review meeting, decisions that would have been unthinkable a month ago. As he and Asher walked across the familiar wood-chip landscape of Serenity Park, Victor noticed his son's posture had changed, less hunched, more expectant. The code playground had transformed from a source of anxiety into something approaching anticipation. Emma spotted them first, racing across the grass with her characteristic exuberance. Asher, we found a caterpillar by the sandbox. Want to see? The moment of magic came when they were leaving. Talia had helped Asher retrieve his water bottle from under the bench, and as she handed it to him, he looked directly at her and said, "Thank you." 2 words, clear and intentional. Victor's heart performed its now familiar somersault, but this time he managed to contain his reaction to a grateful smile. Progress, Talia had taught him, was best acknowledged quietly. Week 3 brought active play. Asher not only joined Emma's treasure hunt but contributed ideas through whispered conversations that grew gradually louder. Victor watched from the bench as his son crawled through tunnels and climbed rope nets, his movements fluid and confident. When Emma got stuck on a particularly challenging monkey bar sequence, Asher positioned himself below her, arms raised, ready to catch her if she fell. "Careful," he whispered just loud enough for Victor to hear. "I've got you." The protective instinct, the willingness to be heard when someone needed help, it was the most beautiful sound Victor had ever witnessed. By week 4, Asher was using 2-word phrases regularly. More swing when he wanted to continue playing. Help please when he needed assistance reaching something. By Emma at the end of each session. Each phrase was deliberately chosen, purposeful, carrying weight far beyond its simple construction. Victor began to believe they had found their rhythm. Tuesday afternoons became sacred time, protected fiercely from the demands of his corporate world. His assistant learned not to schedule anything between 1:30 and 5 p.m. on Tuesdays. His board of directors adapted to his new availability restrictions without question. The results spoke for themselves, as Victor's renewed focus during other times more than compensated for the time away. But success, as Victor should have remembered from his business experience, is rarely linear. The crisis arrived on a Thursday evening in the form of an urgent call from his company's Tokyo division. A major client was threatening to pull out of a $47 million contract unless Victor could personally oversee emergency negotiations. The timeline was non-negotiable. Fly out Friday night, work through the weekend, return Tuesday evening. "I can't," Victor told his assistant, Marcus, during their emergency conference call. "Tuesday is not an option." "Sir," Marcus replied carefully, "this is Yamamoto Industries. If we lose this contract, we're looking at laying off 60 people in the Seattle division alone." The weight of responsibility settled on Victor's shoulders like lead. 60 families, 60 livelihoods, against one afternoon with his son. His son, who was finally finding his voice. "Book the flight," he said, hating himself even as the words left his mouth. Friday morning, he tried to explain the situation to Asher over breakfast. "Daddy has to travel for work, buddy. Just for a few days. We'll be back to the code playground next Tuesday, I promise." Asher's face shuttered closed. The expressive eyes that had grown so bright over the past month went flat and distant. He nodded once, then returned to his cereal without another word. The flight to Tokyo was torture. Victor tried to focus on contract negotiations and profit margins, but his mind kept drifting to a small boy who had finally learned to trust that Tuesday afternoons were reliable, that his father would always be there, present and patient, on those wood-chip paths. Saturday and Sunday passed in a blur of conference rooms and hostile negotiations. Victor managed to save the contract, but the victory felt hollow. Every time his phone buzzed, he hoped for a text from the nanny reporting that Asher had spoken at home, had maintained his progress despite the disruption. The messages told a different story. Asher very quiet today. Didn't respond when I asked about lunch preferences. He's withdrawn again, communicating only through nods. Spent most of the afternoon drawing at the kitchen table. Wouldn't show me the pictures. By Monday evening, Victor was desperate to return. The Tuesday flight couldn't come soon enough. He landed at JFK at 1:15 p.m. Tuesday afternoon and made a decision that would have seemed impossible 6 weeks ago. Instead of going to the office to debrief the Tokyo success, he drove straight home, picked up Asher, who hadn't spoken a word since Friday, and headed for Serenity Park. They were 45 minutes late. Victor's phone had been buzzing continuously with calls from the office, texts about the emergency board meeting that had been scheduled to hear his Tokyo report. A meeting worth millions. A meeting that could determine the future of his company. He turned the phone off entirely. At the code playground, Talia and Emma were waiting on their usual bench. Victor could see the concern in Talia's eyes as she watched Asher walk silently beside him, the spark of the past month dimmed to barely a flicker. He stopped talking the moment I left, Victor said, settling beside her while Asher sat motionless on his swing, staring at the ground. 3 days, and we're back to complete silence. He needs to know he comes first, Talia said quietly. Not just in words, but in choices. Children measure love through presence, not promises. But the business, Victor began, will survive without you for one afternoon a week, Talia finished firmly. Asher won't survive feeling abandoned every time work calls. The words stung because they were true. Victor looked at his son, sitting silent and small on the swing, and realized he was facing the most important negotiation of his life. Not across a conference table, but in his own heart. His phone, though silenced, lit up with an incoming call. The board meeting. They were waiting for him. Victor stood up, walked to the nearest trash can, and threw his phone inside. The gesture was so unexpected, so completely contrary to everything anyone at Serenity Park knew about him, that several parents stopped their conversations to stare. Emma gasped audibly. Even Asher looked up from the ground, his eyes wide with shock. "Daddy?" Asher whispered, the first word he'd spoken in 4 days. Victor returned to the swing and knelt in the wood chips, ruining his second-best business suit. "Yes, buddy, you threw away your phone." "I did," Victor confirmed, "because nothing on that phone is more important than being here with you." "But your work." "My work will wait," Victor said firmly. "You are my priority, not just today, but every Tuesday forever. No more trips during our code playground time. No more broken promises." The transformation was visible. Asher's posture straightened. The light returned to his eyes. He slipped off the swing and wrapped his arms around Victor's neck, burying his face against his father's shoulder. "I missed you," Asher said, his voice muffled but clear. "I missed you too," Victor replied, his own voice thick with emotion. "And I'm never missing another Tuesday again." What happened next stunned everyone present. An older man approached their bench, someone Victor had noticed but never spoken to during their previous visits. He cleared his throat apologetically. "Excuse me," he said to Victor. "I couldn't help but overhear some of the other parents talking. Something about your work being more important than your son?" Victor tensed, prepared to defend his choices, his commitment to providing for Asher's future. But before he could respond, Asher stepped forward. "That's my daddy," Asher said, his voice carrying clearly across the code playground for the first time ever in front of strangers. "And he's the best daddy in the whole world. He threw away his phone to play with me." The silence that followed was profound. Every conversation on the code playground had stopped. Parents, children, even the maintenance crew had paused to witness this small boy defending his father with the pure conviction that only children possess. "He comes to play with me every Tuesday," Asher continued, gaining confidence with each word. He sits on the bench and watches me and Emma, and he never looks at his phone because he says I'm the most important thing ever. Spontaneous applause began from somewhere near the slides and spread throughout the entire code playground. Parents were openly crying. Children, sensing the importance of the moment without fully understanding it, began cheering. Victor sank to his knees again, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just occurred. His son hadn't just spoken to strangers. He had spoken for him, about him, with pride and love that echoed across the entire park. Victor learned that true success isn't measured in profits, but in the words that matter most. Like this video if you agree that the greatest victories happen not in boardrooms, but in the moments when love finds its voice. As the applause faded and normal code playground activity resumed, Victor realized his phone was still in the trash can. His company was probably in crisis mode. The board meeting had certainly proceeded without him, and for the first time in his adult life, he didn't care at all. 6 months after that life-changing Tuesday afternoon, Victor Langston's corner office looked dramatically different. The wall that had once displayed awards and business achievements now showcased Asher's artwork. Dozens of drawings depicting their code playground adventures, family moments, and fantastical worlds where quiet heroes saved the day through kindness rather than conquest. The most significant change, however, wasn't visible to casual observers. It lived in the way Victor structured his days, his decisions, his definition of success itself. "I need you to clear my calendar every Tuesday from noon to 6, Victor had told Marcus the week after his dramatic phone disposal. Non-negotiable. Board meetings, client emergencies, international crises, they all work around that window. Marcus had initially protested, citing upcoming quarterly reviews and merger discussions, but Victor's resolve was absolute. More importantly, his renewed focus during the remaining 4.5 days each week produced results that impressed even his most demanding investors. When a leader operates from authentic priority alignment, efficiency follows naturally. The corporate restructuring that followed surprised industry analysts. Victor began delegating responsibilities he'd previously hoarded, developing his executive team in ways that strengthened the entire organization. His leadership style evolved from command and control to collaborative guidance, incorporating the patience and presence he'd learned from watching Talia work with children. "I used to lead through fear," he admitted during a company-wide meeting 6 months later. "I thought strength meant doing everything myself, controlling every outcome. But true strength is creating environments where others can find their voice and use it powerfully." The speech received a standing ovation, but more importantly, it signaled a cultural shift throughout the organization. Employee satisfaction scores reached record highs. Retention improved dramatically. Productivity increased across all divisions. Victor had discovered that the principles that unlocked his son's voice, patience, presence, authentic care, were equally transformative in professional environments. Meanwhile, at Serenity Park, something extraordinary was taking shape. Other parents had begun approaching Victor and Talia during their Tuesday sessions, sharing their own struggles with children who communicated differently. A mother whose daughter had been diagnosed with social anxiety. A father whose son struggled with stuttering. Families dealing with autism spectrum challenges, ADHD communication differences, and various forms of selective mutism. "What you did for Asher," one mother said during their 3rd month of regular meetings. "Could you help us understand how to support our daughter? She hasn't spoken at school all year." Talia and Victor exchanged glances. Neither had intended to become informal counselors, but the need was undeniable. Children throughout their community were struggling to find their voices, and their parents were desperately seeking alternatives to clinical interventions that weren't working. They started small. Monthly gatherings at Serenity Park, always on Saturday mornings when the code playground attracted families naturally. No formal structure, no professional credentials required, just parents sharing experiences and children playing together without performance pressure. The first gathering attracted 12 families. Word spread organically through school networks and online parent groups. By the 4th month, they were seeing 30 families regularly, with a waiting list of others hoping to join. "We're not therapists," Talia would emphasize at the beginning of each session. "We're parents who learned that community and patience can accomplish what isolation and pressure cannot." The results spoke louder than any professional endorsement could have. Children who had been silent for years began whispering to new friends. Kids with severe social anxiety started participating in group games. Parents who had felt isolated in their struggles found understanding and practical support. Victor's company took notice of these developments, not just because their CEO was involved, but because the principles were clearly effective. The organization became the first in their industry to implement comprehensive family support policies, on-site childcare, flexible scheduling for parent-teacher conferences, mental health resources specifically designed for families with communication-different children. The policies attracted national attention from business journals and parenting organizations alike. Other companies began adopting similar approaches, recognizing that supporting employees' family challenges ultimately strengthened workplace performance. At the center of all this expansion, Asher continued his own remarkable journey. School, once a source of dread, became manageable as select teachers learned to create the same patient, pressure-free environments that had unlocked his voice. His third-grade teacher, Mrs. Chen, collaborated with Talia to implement classroom strategies that honored different communication styles. Asher began volunteering answers during small group discussions, then gradually speaking up during larger class activities. His friendship with Emma deepened into something beautiful and lasting. They developed their own creative projects, collaborative stories, elaborate code playground games, even a small neighborhood newspaper that featured interviews with other children about their favorite activities. Asher's role as interviewer helped him practice conversation skills while serving a purpose larger than himself. Most importantly, his confidence grew steadily. He remained naturally quiet. His temperament hadn't changed, but the difference between thoughtful quietness and anxiety-induced silence was profound. Asher now chose when to speak rather than feeling trapped in silence. The transformation extended beyond individual families and single organizations. Social media, initially through parents sharing their experiences, began amplifying the story. The hashtag Serene Voices, coined by one of the participating mothers, started trending in parenting circles, then expanded to educational and business communities. Local television stations picked up the story, featuring segments about the grassroots movement that was helping communication-different children find their voices through community support rather than clinical intervention. National parenting magazines published articles about the Serenity Park approach, and similar programs began emerging in cities across the country. "We never intended to start a movement," Victor told the journalist interviewing him for a feature story. "We just wanted to help our son. But when you discover something that works, sharing it becomes a responsibility." The movement's core principles remain simple: presence over pressure, community over isolation, patience over quick fixes. Centers in Minneapolis, Portland, Austin, and Atlanta began hosting their own code playground gatherings, adapting the model to local needs while maintaining the foundational philosophy. Educational consultants started incorporating these approaches into school district training programs. Corporate leadership development courses began including modules on patience-based management techniques. Child development programs at universities requested guest lectures from both Talia and Victor about their experiences. But perhaps the most profound ripple effect was the simplest one. Families throughout the country began prioritizing presence over productivity, relationship over achievement, listening over speaking. Victor's transformation from corporate warrior to present father had demonstrated that success could be redefined without sacrificing excellence. His company's performance had actually improved as his priorities shifted. His relationship with Asher had become the foundation for a more authentic, effective approach to all his relationships. The phone in the trash can moment, as it became known in their family storytelling, had become a symbol of choosing love over obligation, presence over profit, voice over silence. Every Tuesday at 2:30 p.m., Victor and Asher still walked across the familiar woodchip paths of Serenity Park. But now, they walked as part of a larger community. Children finding their voices, parents learning to listen, families discovering that the most important conversations happen not when we're trying to fix someone, but when we're simply willing to hear them. 1 year later, Victor sat on the same weathered bench at Serenity Park, but everything had changed, and nothing had changed at all. Asher's laughter still rang across the code playground, but now it was accompanied by confident conversation with a group of friends who had learned to value his thoughtful observations and creative ideas. The boy who had once sat silently on swings now organized elaborate games, mediated code playground disputes with remarkable wisdom, and served as the unofficial greeter for new children who seemed overwhelmed by social interactions. "Emma, can you show Marcus how to cross the monkey bars?" Asher called out, his voice carrying the natural authority of someone comfortable in his own skin. "He's nervous, but I told him you're the best teacher." Victor smiled, remembering when those same monkey bars had seemed like insurmountable barriers. Now they were simply code playground equipment, tools for connection rather than sources of anxiety. Talia approached the bench carrying 2 coffee cups, a Tuesday tradition that had evolved over the months of their deepening friendship. What had begun as grateful conversations about Asher's progress had grown into something neither had expected. A partnership built on shared values, complementary strengths, and genuine affection that transcended their different backgrounds. "He's come so far," she said, settling beside Victor as they watched their children play. "They both have," Victor replied, accepting the coffee with a smile that held promises beyond code playground supervision. 6 months later, that promise became reality in a ceremony that perfectly reflected their blended family's journey. The wedding took place naturally at Serenity Park. Emma served as maid of honor, her speech bringing tears to guests who had followed the family's transformation. But it was Asher, as best man, who delivered the moment no one would ever forget. "Most kids get nervous speaking in front of people," he began, his voice steady and clear as he stood before 200 guests. "I used to be so nervous I couldn't speak at all, but Talia taught me something important. Words aren't just sounds, they're bridges between hearts." The audience was completely silent, captivated by the poise of this young boy who understood the power of the gift he'd been given. "Talia gave me words," Asher continued, looking directly at his new stepmother with eyes bright with love. "But more importantly, she gave us family. She showed my daddy that being present is better than being perfect. She showed me that being quiet is okay, but being afraid isn't necessary." He turned to the crowd, no longer the anxious child who had once sat silently on swings, but a confident young man who understood his own worth. "When people love you for exactly who you are, you find courage you never knew you had. Talia and my daddy teach me that every day. And now Emma and I get to be brother and sister forever, which is basically the best thing ever." Not a single eye remained dry. The applause that followed wasn't just for a wedding speech. It was for the journey they had all witnessed. The transformation that had rippled far beyond one family to touch countless others. As Victor and Talia exchanged vows, they promised not just to love each other, but to continue creating spaces where every voice could be heard, where every child could find their courage, where every family could discover that their struggles might be the very thing that leads to their greatest strength. The deeper truth that had emerged from their story was beautifully simple. Every voice matters, even when it whispers. Every breakthrough begins with someone willing to listen without trying to fix. Every miracle starts with showing up consistently, patiently, lovingly. Their experience had proven that the most profound healing often comes not from experts with degrees and protocols, but from ordinary people who choose to see potential instead of problems, who offer invitation instead of intervention, who understand that community creates courage. Thousands of families across the country now gather in their own neighborhood parks, creating safe spaces for children to find their voices naturally. The Serene Voices movement continues to grow, not because it promises quick fixes, but because it honors the truth that lasting change happens through relationship, patience, and unconditional acceptance. Victor's company continues to lead their industry in family-supportive policies, proving that prioritizing employee well-being enhances rather than hampers business success. Talia completed her doctorate in child development, focusing her research on community-based interventions that honor children's natural timelines. But perhaps the most beautiful legacy is the simplest one. A code playground bench where families still gather every Tuesday at 2:30, where children learn that their voices matter, where parents discover that presence is the greatest gift they can offer. If this story moved you, hit that like button and let us know in the comments. Share your own breakthrough moment below. When did someone's patience unlock something powerful in your life? Subscribe for more stories of unexpected miracles that prove love always finds a way. And share this with someone who needs to remember that no silence is permanent when met with unconditional acceptance. Because somewhere right now, a child is sitting quietly waiting for someone to see their potential instead of their problems. Your story might be the bridge that helps them find their voice.